what is going on? What are they? How do they work? How do they work? Let's just start there.
So at the most basic level, they're incretin mimetics. We talked about what incretins are. Mimetic basically just means they're mimicking the action of these incretins.
Okay.
The first kind of generation, which are still very pronounced, are GLP-1 only.
Okay.
That's still the one that we discussed most today, the one that we understand the most. And I just want to hit the big point: slowing gastric emptying, suppressing appetite, improving satiety, decreasing the inappropriate glucagon secretion. So it's involved in that regulation aspect. So you're looking at semaglutide being the chemical name of the drug. And just to back up a step, what they're doing is they're mimicking these incretins, in this case GLP-1, by a synthetic form of them that's basically got a side chain added to them. It gets very in the chemistry, organic chemistry, but it prolongs their activity. So now they're going to function much, much longer. There were initially a generation of drugs that are still used, like Tradjenta, these DDP-4 drugs. Basically, they're responsible for that quick breakdown of GLP-1. These medications are resistant to that DDP-4. That's also why, I don't want to get too in the weeds here, but why the medications don't work together. You say, well, I'm going to combine some of my diabetic drugs in this specific case, because the DDP4s are breaking down, or you block their activity and you block the breakdown of GLP. These drugs are resistant to it. So once you add this drug on board, it overrides any need to add that other pretty hot, medication class as well. Those Tradjentas, Onglyzas, that again, you just wouldn't need. It's not going to have the effect, and they're very expensive too.
And these were created for, you mentioned diabetics, type 2 diabetics. Mm-hmm. That's because functionally what they do is help regulate the blood sugar,
glucose control.
So,
and then ultimately also caloric intake and fat storage management. When you're dealing with all these different aspects, also it's central activity, not just peripheral. That's where then we go into the weight loss aspect too. But it's glucose control is, if you had to name one kind of buzz term,
right?
So semaglutide is the drug name. Ozempic and Wegovy are the examples, the brand names that you'll hear. They're weekly injections.
Okay.
Ribelsis is also semaglutide. It's an oral daily tablet. Because I'm a little surprised. Ribelsis is definitely used. I'm surprised it's not used a little more. I looked at the effectiveness, and from what I saw, it was pretty equal. The only issue being it's been studied up to 14 milligrams, which is equivalent to the medium 1 milligram dose of Ozempic.
Okay.
So Ozempic has a whole nother kind of double dose to hit you with.
Yeah.
Yes. But again, when you're talking about ultimately maybe making the decision of being on these medications, or maybe your insurance is kicking you from one to another at the new year, those kind of things, that's one aspect you can consider. If the injection aspect of this really bothers you, but it's something that you and your doctor have determined that you need, there is that same semaglutide available as a tablet that would be equivalent to the medium Ozempic dose.
Okay.
Yeah, I believe in late 2023, there was a trial done, or a paper that came out about 50 milligrams of oral semaglutide. So I think it's very much in the works.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. With so many, and this is philosophical in a sense, but so many of these things, it's how were they studied? When were they studied? What doses were they comfortable studying? Some of this still just comes down to good old business and studies of what they're going to get involved here and what they're going to push and what insurance companies will cover and side effect profiles. All those things kind of come into play, maybe with why there isn't a black or white answer to all. Why isn't Ribelsis, semaglutide already available in 28?
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's semaglutide. What's the other one?
So the other one it's kind of fallen out of fashion. It's the old Victoza, Saxenda. They're daily injections. So those were kind of the first ones approved, basically along with Byetta. They've kind of fallen out of favor. Victoza was used for type 2 diabetes, still around. Saxenda, it was the first approved for weight loss. It's only available in one strength. So you can just see, obviously there's the component of making sure these medications work, but then as you're learning about what issues maybe come about with them, once a day injections, not ideal. Not being able to titrate doses, not ideal. So now you can see kind of an improvement from the drug company
process.
End. Yes.
Okay. And then there's another one.
Trulicity's in there too. It's basically as effective and as expensive as Ozempic and semaglutide.
Okay.
Once weekly is the key, right? So Trulicity goes in that first group with the ones that are the GLP onlys, but they're used once a week.
And like Joey said, to distinguish the key is to distinguish approval status. So Trulicity only approved for type 2 diabetes, Ozempic only approved in type 2 diabetics, but then you have this whole other brand name more or less with a little bit differentiating strengths that are then approved for the separate indication.
Yeah, Wegovy, like Dante said, it just they kind of tweak the strengths a little bit, like 1.7 instead of 2, those kind of things. But then this drug company pays to get it approved for weight loss, and now there's a differentiating factor for prescribers, for patients to understand, as well as insurance companies. They can tell by the drug and by criteria, because these are very expensive. I mean, that's again a whole nother thing. But for the importance of these, there is definitely a financial burden on the insurers and on. You're looking basically at $1,000 a month every 4 weeks for any of these.
Wow.
With generics pretty far off, especially if they've legitimately improved the use, convenience, and functionality and dose availability of these.
Okay. Dadgum. That is not cheap, but I suppose in the long run, that's going to be a lot cheaper than dealing with all the health ramifications of long-term obesity.
Yes.
Or diabetes for that matter. Okay. So that's semaglutide. You said that's a GLP only one. What's the other one?
So now, May of 22, Mounjaro came on board. That is a dual GLP-1 GIP agonist. That hits both. They're both involved in very similar things. Again, GIP is not quite as well understood. Maybe Dante has some things to add, but there's the similar things that we're talking about with GLP-1. GIP also is involved in bone remodeling. And then, like I mentioned earlier, while GLP-1 has shown to remain functional in type 2 diabetics, GIP is not. So when you're adding that on board, you're adding another component that has been shown to be deficient in patients with type 2 diabetes. Okay. So it's hitting both of those. It's not two drugs. It's one drug that has the ability to activate both of the receptors.
Okay.
Those are, again, Mounjaro approved back to the indications thing, the approvals, maybe why your insurance makes you go on one or the other. May 22, Mounjaro, type 2 diabetes only. Zepbound is the new one, fresh off the presses, 11/2023. That is approved for obesity and weight management. The FDA, I don't know if they kind of mandated or exactly what happened, but it's the same drug company. They just split the drug. Like Wegovy has little, like Dante mentioned, the differences in dose. They're like 1.7 to 2, almost like, what are they doing here?
Yeah.
These are identical strengths, all availabilities, identical drug, different name, different indications.
Wow. Okay. So Ozempic and Wegovy are the same drug with slightly different indications, slightly different dosages, but they're the same thing. And so depending on whether you're diabetic or, air quotes,
your
simply obese,
doctor is going to
they're going to point you in. Same thing with, you said Mounjaro and Zepbound.
But this time went straight to identical. They're not playing around with the doses.
Wow. Oh, really? Oh my gosh. Okay. And these are primarily for diabetics and people who are obese. Is there any more clarification to that? It's not type 1 diabetics, it's type 2 diabetics.
Yes, they're only approved for type 2 diabetics and in obesity. Related to type 1, there have been some studies showing that, again, because of its central activity, that if you're, I believe it was 62%, I saw, 62% of type 1 diabetics are overweight or obese.
Okay.
So there are studies kind of ongoing that do show that there's still some HbA1c decrease, the marker of long-term blood sugar control. It has led to increased insulin doses and weight loss. So not for every type 1 diabetic, it's not approved for that. You're going to have trouble with your insurance, all those things, but it's out there.
Okay.
That, again, given that there is some overlap just purely related to weight and the issues that weight gain and excess weight cause, there still can be some benefit.
That's so fascinating. So it was the drug was originally created to help lower A1C in type 2 diabetics, and the weight loss was a wonderful side effect. And now it's able to help type 1 diabetics because of that wonderful side effect. Not all of them, but those who are obese, it can help have that secondary effect, like bringing it back full circle.
Yeah, and it's important to note that just from a biological theoretical standpoint, that it's one of its roles is kind of pushing your body to create insulin, which type 1 diabetics cannot do. So again, studies are definitely needed to make sure that there's a safety component if it's even warranted. But again, this study was from 2019, so pretty recent, American Journal of Health System Pharmacists. So it was pretty interesting to see the genuine benefit of the GLP-1s.
Fascinating.